welcome to this very, very important webinar on using our inventory management systems to reduce food waste. And we're going to be chatting to SYSPRO Africa today about the role of technology and how easy it is to actually use technology to help us with this international crisis of food waste. And we're really looking forward to getting some very specific tips. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Doug Hunter to you. This is the second time that Doug is actually chatting to us, and he heads up professional services at SYSPRO Africa. I'm sure that by now you've heard that he's definitely not a South African by birth. He has an interesting accent, and that possibly also is one of the reasons why he enjoys malt whiskey. He also is a very adventurous person, as you can see, but in his professional role, he is really passionate about manufacturing and logistics, and he really wants to help you as an organization understand how you can implement innovation, improve your processes, and use IT in your business. So Doug, we're over to you to hear more about how you can assist us in considering reducing waste by managing our inventory systems. The floor and the mouse is yours.
Okay, thanks. So I just wanted to do an introduction. So I've got a bit of a frog in my throat, so if I cough every now and again, I apologize. And I'll try and speak in an accent that you can understand. So people don't realize, but about a third of the food grown, distributed, eaten, consumed, and used is wasted in South Africa, which is horrendous. So that when you consider all the number of people that are starving, but of course there are reasons for that. And although 31% actually of food in South Africa is wasted, 33% is wasted in the US. So you have to think sometimes the developing nations are good at the wrong things. So this is a global problem. It's not, we're not really out of sync with the rest of the world. And it's often to do with the fact that farmers grow the wrong stuff. So if you go down, you'll see that you know about Brexit maybe at the moment, but the European Union was an idea that came about to try and stop everyone growing the same things and get certain areas where maybe apples grow best, grow them there and supply the whole of Europe with apples. But farmers don't listen to that sort of thing. They say, no, we grow mealies, so we're going to grow mealies. And then you oversupply the market, and that's one means of waste. And then as you go down the supply chain, if you buy your food from Waitrose in Britain or Woolworths here, where your pumpkin or your whatever vegetable is has been chopped up, by the time you buy it, one, it's very expensive, and secondly, 50% of it's already been chopped off in the process. You would hope it ends up in soup, but if it doesn't, it ends up in a landfill. So there are many reasons why food is wasted. So part of it is the demand is different to what is supplied for many reasons. As you go through the supply chain, people move it in trucks and things. If it's bulk like sugar or rice or something like that, that's not in a pack, it's not been packed yet. When you transfer it from the truck to some sort of silo, there's often 1 or 2% wasted there. And it's not really the right thing to do to drag it, sort of shovel it off the ground and put it back in. That has gone, it's wasted. So, and then even if you get your logistics and your supply chain really perfect, which some do, there's still shelf life. If you don't leave enough with products that do have shelf life, especially things like yogurt, but I mean, bread's got shelf life. In fact, even Coca-Cola in a 2-liter plastic bottle or PET bottle has about a month or 2 shelf life. So if you don't leave shelf life on the shelf, buyers don't have enough time to buy it and consume it before the date says, oh, you should use by, and then they throw it out. And typically you can use food well after the use by date, actually. So the bottom line of all of that is that avoiding waste of food is about, like anything in a supply chain, it's about planning, timing, and supplying what is needed at the right time. Those are the critical requirements. And there are also requirements. These are the things that an ERP system like SYSPRO helps to enable and thus minimizes the waste. So whilst this is really about how technology will help you, in this environment of inventory management, what happens is there's a lot of stuff happening in the background you're not really aware of. Sorry, I'm actually not getting through here. There we go. Oh, damn. Okay. So I'm going to hit a few here because there's a lot of builds here. So I'm going to show you some of the theory actually and tell you this is what's going on in the background in SYSPRO. So first of all, if you look at this graph, this is an ancient graph. So it says, what is the demand in a supply chain? So if you look at volume on the left and time on the right, and this is from 98, 20 years ago. So it hasn't changed. If you look at the consumer demand, it's a black line. So typically for a lot of food products, consumer demand, when you average it for the whole country, is pretty flat. It may be growing slightly as more people, the population gets bigger, or more people get income and can afford to buy certain types of food. And typically buy from a shop, not from the farmer, or a market. So the retailer could be a market or a shop. They buy in chunks, days, every 2 days or every day or every week. Some foods you'll find the retailers like Pick and Pay, ShopRite and the rest, and Spar and Macro, they would, they'll have big orders for some products. Now, this isn't all for food. So like toilet paper, they might order weekly, and milk and things they'll obviously order daily, but you can see that it doesn't match, the pattern of order doesn't match the same as the demand, that flat line for demand. And then if you go back, you can see that the manufacturers say, well, we don't believe this forecast, but luckily they make it in time. And then you'll see there's another line coming. So they often just make it in time. And what's happening is an ERP system for the players in this supply chain is really trying to share this information and help you get things right. So deliver at the right time. And the gap between those lines is inventory, because if you could order a bri pack of chicken with different bits of the chicken in it, and you went and you told the shop, I'm going to buy 6 bags of that on Friday because I'm having a bri, and they order it on Thursday to get it there on Friday, and they did that for every consumer, you would have very erratic supply. I mean, you'd have trucks going all over the place with 1 bag of chicken. So obviously people don't do that. So to help us all get to the shops at the end of the month or the end of the week, our supply chain behavior dictates that we have to have a logistics process in chunks like this, and therefore there's a pile of pipeline inventory. So in the supply chain, from even the farm through the manufacturing process, the distribution process, the retailer, there's stock all the way, just like there is in yours and my fridge. And that's all stock that can go fraught, can go out of date, can be surplus because we don't want to eat it anymore, whatever the reason is. So demand, we'll talk about it later, is a big factor in getting it right. Then there's another bit of theory you should know about. There's a thing called the service exchange curve. Sounds very fancy. Some mathematicians many years ago said, well, for every product or even a group of products, or for all the stock that you keep, if you want a certain service level, there is a total value, an investment in inventory that you have to keep to maintain that service level. And that service level, typically, if you have 100 million in stock and you're getting 80% in this diagram, service level, there's a problem there, because that black line, the curving line, represents the relationship, and it says, the better service level you want, the higher the value of stock you need to keep, effectively, if you look at it. But here, this is a typical example of most companies, not just in South Africa. They say, well, we'll keep 100 million, but when they measure their service level, in other words, if you go to the supermarket, you go for 10 items, or I say buy 100 items, you only get 80. You might buy different branded products, but if you go to the supermarket every time and it's always 80, you're eventually going to say, I'm not buying here. I want to go somewhere where I can get 95 out of my 100. And that tells you that this 100 million is wasted. They've got far too much stock of the wrong things and not enough of the right things. So if you got your system right, your ERP system, or you got some consulting going, you could actually do some smart stuff, because this relationship, and don't worry how they worked it out. I've never met anyone who's done this, but the systems do this in the background. That 100 million with the relationship for this particular set of stock, it says you should get 99% service level, but you're not. So it means you've got a lot of dead stock. So if you're a consultant, a little tip is you can go there and you can say, well, listen, I can half your inventory and get you to 95. And that's quite a value proposition. So the point is that people don't manage the stock mix. That's the first thing you should think about. So to get to the right stock mix and do the forecasting, there's a whole pile of processes you have to go through. But you should understand, again, looking at a supply chain, so have a drink. If you were Unilever or Tiger Brands or someone like that, you probably make products to stock. So you'll buy from farmers in bulk or from the cooperatives in bulk. You make your finished products and you pack them, and then you put them in a finished goods store. You may ship them directly to some of the retail outlets, the big ones, the Santons and the Cavendish Squares, etc. But you would also send them to the retailer, Pick and Pay, ShopRite, etc., their central distribution center. So you're quite far up the supply chain. You could be a month away from the consumer, if you see what I mean. So you make the stuff, you store it, and then you sell from stock. So you sell to Pick and Pay, or you sell to ShopRite, or you sell to a corner cafe or something. Other types of, so you have to have a forecast for the goods, you have to build up stock, and you distribute from stock. And it's usually for products that can be batched and are common to customers. So it's not one-offs. Then you would have make to order, where you'll schedule specific orders to customer dates, more like fabricated metals business, where you might be making some sort of fabrication, some bit of ducting for a building, for the air conditioning, and it's very specific to that building, so it's not the same for another customer. So you need to know more about it, and then you only make it once you get the order. So you can do things a bit later, or sometimes make to order if it's very sophisticated, could take you a year, like building parts for a power station. And then there's assemble to order, which is a means of trying to move make to order, which is quite difficult to manage, to change make to order to make to stock. And that's like packing to order. Or in the food business, if you're making soup, you make the soup, you store the soup as a finished product in bulk, and when you get the orders, you ship some to Woolworths, some to Pick and Pay, and some to Spar, but you only pack it in their specific packaging at the last minute, and then you send it. So that's really assembled to order. So or if it's discrete parts like bits of a car in the automotive components business, you would build up a stock of the individual components like the brake pads, the brake disc, and a few bolts and bits and pieces, and then when you get the order, you put them in a kit and you sell the kit. So those are some of the dimensions of what people need to be aware of in the background. And now, the other thing is the maturity of your organization. So the first thing you need to think about is how much bang for your buck will you get out of an ERP system if you buy one. So it's a bit like saying, I'm going to go racing at Kyalami. You could buy a Lamborghini, it would be quite useful, it would go fast, but the one thing you should know is Lamborghini makes tractors as well. So if you just ask Lamborghini for a tractor and you go to Kyalami on a Sunday, you probably won't do very well. You could plow the grass, but you're not going to win the race. So people need to understand that in that case, the guys bought the wrong thing. They need to understand that you can't go for the Lamborghini first in inventory. You have to start with the basics. So to get a bang for your buck, you've got to do some basic things first, and I'll tell you what those are. You then would progress, and some companies would do, well, most companies actually would do these first two stages at the same time. So the first one is basic stock control. So a few order points and you order up to a target. Don't worry, we'll go through a bit more detail. Then managed inventory. You have to do proper inventory management before you move to the more sophisticated stuff. So there's planning and control factors, material requirements planning, or demand-driven material requirements planning. So I'll tell you about some of that stuff. And then finally, you would optimize. So the point is to go straight to optimization of your inventory, in my view, is foolhardy if you haven't done the first two. And you can do the first two in your first implementation of a SYSPRO ERP. So you're talking about, on the optimized side, much more sophisticated things than the lower levels. So if your company and your people aren't ready to optimize inventory because you've never even thought about inventory, rather start on the left. So let's do that. Okay, so that's the... So you have to think about things, a bill of materials or a recipe. So in food, it's really a recipe or a formulation. So if I'm going to make soup, the soup will have a whole pile of vegetables in it, some chicken stock or vegetable stock or beef stock. It will have hopefully some salt, pepper, spices, water. There's a pile of ingredients that go into it. And luckily, you probably do just throw them all in a big pot, make 3 tons of soup, and then you put it in tins or in packets, or you freeze it or whatever you do. So your system, it's a very good system, SYSPRO ERP, but it's pretty dumb. It says, well, what's your unit of measure? Are you measuring things in kilograms or are you measuring them as each? Well, in the likes of making soup, that would probably be in volumes of liters. And typically, then, to make 1 liter of soup, I need a certain quantity per of all the other ingredients. Salt, I probably need 0.0001 kilograms of salt. So maybe I wouldn't measure salt in kilograms, I'd measure it in grams. I need 1 tin. I don't need 0.2 kilograms a tin, I need 1 tin. So your unit of measure has to be allocated to every product, so that when you create the structure, which is the ingredients that go into the soup or the finished product, the yogurt or whatever, it's in the right order. Now we went up, I don't know why, down, I don't know why. Can I go? This thing's racing forward, thank you. So there are a whole lot of other things you need to look at. The quantity per, the links, how many, if like a car, I know it's not food, but a car's typically got 4 wheels. So if you're getting wheels, if you make 1 car, you need 4 wheels. If we're making soup again, we might make it in a 3,000 litre vessel. So you might configure your bill of materials to be per 3,000 litres, because that's, or 3,000 kilograms, that's the batch. How much do we need of each ingredient? And you have to be careful that you get these relationships right, because this is master data that you put into your ERP system. If you don't get this right, and the lead time, how long does it take for you to make something or to receive something after you order it? The lead time, if you don't get those numbers right and you put in 0, which many companies do, your system's going to think you can instantaneously procure materials, which is impossible. But so you need to put in a week or 2 weeks or whatever it takes, and then the ERP system will work out the right time for you to put a purchase order in. So that's the first lot of stuff. Then in the background, and nobody's ever asked anyone to prove this stuff unless you're an engineer in your first year at university, reordering, everyone understands or knows about an economic order quantity. What it means is it's balancing the cost of orders versus the cost of holding stock. So this graph, and I'll just explain it, that all I want you to understand is you can have different order quantities, but what's the effect? And you need to think about these things. So we've a demand of 1,200 units a year, that means 100 a month. So every 5 months, we've used 500. So you see the line goes down to May, 500. And then the system says, oh, I better order 500 then. And we order up, we use 500. So that is a very, very basic economic order quantity. So we're just replenishing 500 every 5 months because we use it. So plan A, our average inventory is half of that, so it's 250. However, I could do a different order process where I order 100. Every time it hits 100, we reorder. So you can see there's a hell of a lot more orders there, but my average stock's much less. So my holding cost is less. I've only got 100. What would be good there is, in the second one, is if suddenly you find there's a problem with the food that you bought in the 500, you would have, and it's very early in the first month, you'd maybe lose 4 months stock. Here you'd lose very little stock. So there are different value propositions between how you set up your ordering. So if you look at inventory management, working capital, in other words, how much stock are you holding? On plan A, you're holding a high level of stock, plan B low. Holding cost, well, obviously it's high in A and it's maybe medium or low in the second one. Obsolescence risk is very high in the first one and low in the second one, but order placement cost is very high on the red one, the second one. So you have to trade these things off, and that's really what the economic quantity does. And that most people just need to know that that's happening, but you don't want to be ordering stuff every day if you don't need to. So there are many ways an ERP system will help you take control of that stuff. But for basics, you're typically going to say, I've got a target stock. I want to keep a week of this product, or I want to keep a month, or I want to keep 100. So for your different ABC categories, and we'll talk about that as well, you probably, if you've got key KVIs that you sell all the time, you're probably going, your system will advise you what to, your ERP system can tell you what to order, because there's so many order points it knows what to do. Your C items, which you don't touch very often, you might order 6 months of them. So you have to look at a target stock. I want to keep maybe 3 days to a week of A items and 6 months of C items. Now let's hope a C item is something like a very dry good that's got a long shelf life. It depends on customer service levels, but to be honest, when you're only ordering up to a target stock, people are not really thinking very strongly about customer service. Again, to do this, if you can reorder or replenish stock every day with a product, why would you keep a month of it, you know? But if it's a product you can only get every 2 months, you're going to keep at least 2 months of it. So these are some of the things you need to think about just for the basics. But this stage we're going to talk about now is what most people use their ERP system to do. First of all, you need to understand the difference between planning and controlling. So planning is like going to, let's say you're in Cape Town, you want to go to Joburg, you plan the journey and you say, I want to get to Joburg on whatever the date is. And I want to go via Bloemfontein, I don't want to go via Bofada or somewhere. So you make a route and a plan and you say that's the plan. Controlling is about, well, we've started the journey. It's more about execution. We've started the journey. Are we on the N1? No, then we're off the plan. We're not going to Joburg. Where are we going? We're going to Eastern Cape. We're on the N2. We're going to PE. So then you monitor it and you say, well, we're in the wrong one, and you make adjustments to get back on plan. And that's the same with inventory. What is it we're trying to achieve? What are we trying to do? What are the sort of ordering characteristics we're doing? How much stock do we want to keep? You set that up, and that's more static data in your ERP system, like what is the lead time and all that sort of stuff, and what's my bill of materials look like, all those things. So the system can do the planning. And then the controlling is, are we sticking to the manufacturing plan? Well, we plan to make 100 this week. We haven't even loaded them yet. Then you start looking at exceptions and you're starting to make adjustments to the plan. Or you find that your stock policy is not right because your demand has gone down and you're now building stock that you can't sell. So you would maybe change the target stock down a bit. So your ERP system will give you reports and things to help you do that. So what are the planning factors? So quantity, how much? Order point I've kind of explained, and order quantity. Order quantities is a strange one. You can order, 100, but if your supplier packs it in 120, rather order in packs of 120 because you'll get a better price. So you can set that up. Relationship to other products. Sometimes you have to make sure that you take cognizance of food colorant, for example. If you don't have the food colorant, you've got everything else. You can't make pink, what are these ring things? You can only make the normal color ones. And forecast attention and accuracy we'll talk a bit about shortly. Timing, when? Lead time to supply. If I put in an order, how long does it take to get here? You need to have that in your system. Alternate suppliers, if that supplier can't supply me, who else can I get? And what is the lead time? Because if I have to import it, it could be 5 times the lead time to get it. And time to deliver, maybe you've got a third-party logistics service provider delivering between your supplier and you, and they can change your lead time from 1 day to 2 weeks if you're not careful. So you have to choose them properly. And your ability to schedule items is, if you're reordering all the time, that's easy. If you only order it occasionally, it's more about when do I do the order than what do I keep in stock. hope you're getting the picture that inventory management's not for sissies. So then you have to think, what's the horizon if I'm planning? Well, if I'm planning for tomorrow, I'm going to be doing immediate things. So it's like changing my schedule, chasing orders, phoning a supplier. Those are the sorts of things you do. It's more about execution. If you are trying to make to stock, that's more like the medium-term plans, weeks and months. You're setting up master production schedules to make things, and you make them in batches and you put them in warehouses, and then you start distributing. And it's the last week again is I'm loading trucks, I'm picking the stuff out of my warehouse. And long-term or strategic is our products are selling so well, especially in the Western Cape, we need to put in a DC in Cape Town, not just Joburg. So it's much more about capital investment. So an ERP system is going to help you on the sort of execution in the medium term. And you do different things. So the point of this slide is that you're doing the midterm planning and operational. So that's the MRP type of space, material requirements planning. And then you're doing the actual scheduling and chasing and expediting of things in the short term. So the production sequencing or phoning up, transport, picking, etc. See what's next. And here's an effect of lead times. Looks complicated. If I want to sell you something, so bottom right, available to sell to the customer, it takes me 30 days as my manufacturing lead time. If I've got nothing in stock, the best I can do is 30 days to give it to you. And if I make this and I don't have any of the component parts that I have to purchase, and their lead time's 90 days because they come from America, I actually have 120 days before I can give you anything. But maybe even that's not true. So you have to be careful with lead times. It could be that when you receive the stuff, you check it and you do a QA check, you send it to the lab, and then you put it in the stock, and that takes 6 days for the raw materials. And the same for your finished product. In the food business, you might have another 3 days and 2 days to pick it, which means that, are you actually achieving 120 days? Well, no, you're not achieving 120 days. You're actually, if it's working days, it's 131, which is 2 weeks late. So if you were to put in those lead times as 30 and 90, your ERP system would be planning on the wrong numbers. You should be putting in 96 and 35. Okay, that's the point of all that. So what is material requirements planning? Because once you've put all the stuff in to the system, what it'll do for you, the SYSPRO ERP or requirements planning, it'll say what's the actual sales you're going to have. Could be forecast, or it could be actual monthly orders that you send to people. Takes the demand for finished goods. It then says, well, if that's the demand, let's see, we've never made more than 10,000 in a week. This looks like we're trying to make 20,000. We need to do something. So this is what people used to do in the back of a cigarette pack. They would work out, what are the really stupid things we're trying to do that we could prevent? And we say, let's reschedule because we can't do 20,000, we can only do 10,000. So you do that and you take the noise out at a high level. So requirements planning allows you to do that. And then it says, well, once you've done that, I'll look at the bill of materials. So look down the bottom left, bill of materials. Look at the relationship and I'll see those finished goods. Well, let's first look a bit up. Have we got any stock of finished goods? Yes, we've got some, but not all of it. Oh, well, I look at the bill of materials. How much raw material do I need? And then it says, have we got some of that raw material in stock? Yes, I've got some, but not all of it. And when it works all of that out, all MRP or requirements planning does, it says, I'll look at these orders, I'll look at the manufacturing orders, I'll look at my stock situation, and I'll tell you what to do. Which is quite handy, because to do that manually for maybe 2,000 SKUs is not an easy job. So if you're not using requirements planning in the food business, you should definitely be thinking about it. And it tells you, you've got a pile of purchase orders or production orders, and it says, hell, you've got far too many purchase orders. Cancel some of these. You're going to flood yourself with the wrong stock, which means you're going to have dead stock or stock that goes off. And you won't have money to buy the stock you do need to supply customer orders. So that's what material requirements planning does. And now the control factors, you would use things like Pareto analysis, which I think I'm about to tell you about. I've explained target stock. The review frequency, you your KVIs, which are the things you probably sell, your A items, you sell 80% of your money comes from those 20% of your items. That's the Pareto principle. So you're going to look at the 20% that give you all the money. You're going to look at them every day or every week at least. But the stuff that gives you the least amount of money, you're going to leave it, not look very often. So differentiate the activities you do when you're controlling things so that you're not wasting time on the wrong stuff. Again, you want bang for your buck. Be very careful of safety stock. Lots of people keep safety stock, and that is actually dead stock. Safety stock, you'll see, should really be zero for most things. And implement cycle counting. So you want your stock to be accurate, because if you think MRP is doing that calculation, if your stock isn't accurate, it's basing its suggestions to you on the wrong information. So cycle counting is where you're counting some stuff every day, and over a period of time, you'll have counted everything in a statistically significant way. So again, the ERP system will help you with that. Let's see what we get. So now let's go further. So there's quite a few things we've done that are, I would say, 50% of SYSPRO or any customers of any ERP system, 50% of customers don't do them. The planning factors, they don't do them properly. And then they come back and they say, well, your software doesn't work. So never underestimate that a planner, an inventory planner or an inventory controller or a category manager or whatever you call them, the guys who are managing what you order and what stock you should keep. These people need to understand inventory management. You can't just, they need to understand your products as well, the way they're made, the way, how they sell. The better they are at knowing your products and your processes, and they understand the basic principles of inventory, well, not the basic, but inventory management, the more likely you're going to be able to increase your service level and reduce the amount of stock you keep, which is quite good. In fact, it's the target of supply chain. So the optimized bit, there's a few other things you can do. Once you've done all these planning factors, these control factors, you've got used to running MRP. I haven't told you about DDMRP, but believe me, changing these parameters like lead times, order points, order quantities, yields, which is the amount you lose when you move something from one place to another. You can put a lot of parameters into your ERP system, and DDMRP gives you a visual display of MRP basically, and it allows people who are maybe, well, it's an easier way of changing some of the parameters, but don't be fooled, you still need an inventory planner. You don't need a clerical person for that job. There's a lot to talk about in this. So now, SYSPRO inventory optimization. We'll look at a forecast. So if that's the history, the red line, so left of today is the history, right is the future. I mean, a trained monkey could tell you that, well, that's the trend. It looks like it's getting better, but it's not exactly what was done. Forecasting algorithms can pretty much tell you that's a seasonal product, and in fact, that's how it will come out. So now you know the demand in the different months, you can drive your MRP, you can manage your stock. However, if you use the wrong forecasting algorithm, it might say, no, that's how it goes, and that happens. So be very careful of forecasting algorithms. This inventory optimization is an area where sometimes you need more than an inventory planner. You need someone who knows what he's talking about, like a guy we've got called Simon Conradi, so that you don't make some of the fundamental mistakes here. And also, you've got to make sure that you've got your product range changes. Outliers, you know, if the Army came to town and, or the World Cup came to town in Cape Town, there was a semi-final, and Coca-Cola don't take note of that, they're going to lose a lot of sales. So, but it doesn't mean because they came in July or whatever the month was, 2010, that in July 2011 they're going to sell the same amount of Coca-Cola, because it's an outlier, really. It's an event that happened once, and it doesn't happen every year. So there's a lot you need to think about, and we're not going into any detail here, but it would be called data cleansing. You've got to make sure you tell your forecasting, you get your history right. You take out stuff that's going to confuse it. And it's a bit of a science. And then the data structures, your product hierarchy. So if you were beer, you've got tins and bottles, or dumpies and cans. You've got bigger cans, smaller cans. You've got 6 packs, you've got 12 packs, you've got 16 packs, you've got 18 packs, you've got 20, you've got 24 packs. You need to tell, and then you've got pallets of maybe 56 times cases of 24 for Castle Light. You need to know what you're forecasting. Are you forecasting pallets? Then you need to know, am I forecasting the demand for pallets in Johannesburg or Cape Town? Oh, and when am I? So that's the geographic. You need to know the geographic structure of your supply chain, like where your DCs are and things. Buckets, months. Are you looking at months or weeks? Typically, you look at months. Kind of explain a lot about that, but typically you look at months. New products versus old. If you bring out Coca-Cola with cannabis in it instead of caffeine, and it's a new product, it's not going to just add to your stock, it's going to take some of the other stuff out. So you can use these forecasting algorithms. You can use the data management in them to say, well, it's going to take 10% of that product, 50% of this product, etc. And market intelligence, never underestimate local knowledge. Sometimes even ERP systems are wrong. In fact, they can be wrong quite a lot if you're not careful. You know, it might not forecast the World Cup rugby coming up, or it does, but it gets it wrong. It's in Japan, it's not in South Africa, so don't put it in this forecast. But your system doesn't know that unless someone tells them. And then safety stock it's to buffer against uncertainty in your planning or uncertainty and unreliability in delivery. If you've got, hold on, let me get rid of that. Can you get rid of that? Just my boss calling me. Thank you. So safety stock is, well, we're doing all this planning, but there's an element we don't know for sure. So the more certain you're about something, the less. So if you know exactly what people are going to take, you don't really keep safety stock. So make to order, for example, you know what the guy wants, you only keep safety stock. But in a make to stock environment, which is typically the food industry, if you don't have good history of sales, and therefore your forecast accuracy isn't very good, and some of your suppliers are a bit ropey on delivery, and they say it's 2 weeks, but sometimes it's 3 weeks for special products, then you start looking at buffering the uncertainty by keeping safety stock, either of the raw materials or the finished goods. But you have to be aware, if you abuse it, you build up a stack of inventory. My thinking is, unless you really need it, safety stock should be nil in an ERP system. And here we have the economic order quantity. I just put it up there to show you there is some maths here. It's a balance of the cost of ordering versus holding cost, and to do with demand per year. No one I know has ever used that in their lives, but systems do. The problem is it doesn't, sorry, can I go back up? How do I go back up? Try that. What it does is it tends to assume, it's like all these basic mathematical formulas, they assume fixed demand and cost relationships, instantaneous replenishment, a lot of rubbish. So in fact, the real formula that MRP systems would use is very much more sophisticated. But the bottom line is it balances the cost of ordering against the cost of keeping stock. Because you can't hold stock for free. You have to pay rent in a building. One of the other sophisticated things that people do in the food business is you can pack products on the same pallet, but different products in different quantities in the same pallet, so that when you send it to the retailer, so you send your food from Unilever to Pick and Pay distribution center, you send them model stock, which is, well, one store, a small store can take 1 pallet, but it's got 50 items on it. So you make a standard mix of 10 or 50 items, and you shrink wrap them on 1 or 2 pallets, and you send that to distribution center, and then they cross-dock it and send it straight to the small store. A large store, typically if it's like, you know, bulky stuff like toilet paper, they'll take pallets of that. So model stock, you might say, for a big store, it's 5 pallets of these things and 2 pallets of those things. For a small store, it's 1 pallet made of 5 cases of this, 6 boxes of that, and 7 layers of that. So that's what model stock's about, and you can put that into your system to plan that so that you create the right output so that logistics service providers and the retailers can buy from you. It's just a trick, but it's more to do with the distribution than the end of the supply chain than the planning. I think we're getting near there. So the last slide is, so the first thing you should realize is inventory management is not that simple. But if you know a few rules, you can make a hell of a difference in your ability to service customers and in your ability to stop your production area going mad because you're confusing them too much. So inventory management, which is what we called supply chain management before supply chain management was named, because supply chain is basically looking at your inventory in the inbound side in your manufacturing process and the outbound side. We used to look at those in isolation. So procurement guys looked at procurement, finished goods guys, category managers looked at finished goods. But now we typically look right across the supply chain and try and optimize stock within our own supply chain between procurement, manufacture, and distribution. And even if we collaborate, because that's the next thing you do is collaborate with both your customers and your suppliers, you can then find cool ways of reducing stock. And I think I might have a couple in here. So management of stock, I said, sort out order quantities, order times, find how often do you order, that type of thing. Manage the stock mix by beware of, I'll give you a special deal from your supplier if you buy a truckload of this stuff, when actually all he's trying to do is get his bonuses, and you then look at it and your buyer is looking at getting a cheaper price through a rebate. These things can kill inventory management, but you have to do them. Just be careful of them. Use different order policies for different items. I think I said, you know, you can replenish every day for some things and maybe buy 6 months of things you hardly ever use. In food, typically you're not buying 6 months or maybe a month. And order sensibly. If you know, if the plan, the MRP says 92.561, order 100 because that's the box that you can buy, and beware of yield losses. The next area is management of suppliers. You need to identify different suppliers to the same product or part, and they might well be radically different in cost, and they could be radically different in lead time because you might have to fly stuff in. So you have to be careful. You don't have one cost and one supplier lead time if you've got two suppliers. You've got two of each. Collaborate, I've said that. Collaborate with suppliers to reduce your lead time to supply. So you help them plan, that's going to help you. And help your supplier stock items and you stock others. So if they have stuff that your suppliers supply to 100 customers, they're going to keep stock of that anyway. Why do you keep a lot of stock? They'll be able to replenish that. But if they're making something specially for you, they're not going to stock that. You're going to need to stock that. So you can be quite judicious about who stocks stock, as long as which items each of you stocks. And that was the suppliers. And I think the last thing is managing people. Train operators in basic inventory management principles. In a warehouse, train them that, you know, you don't just put it down on the ground, you put it where you're supposed to put it. If your warehouse management system or your ERP system says, put it in aisle A, row B, number 25, put it there, because it's going to think it's there, and when it asks you to get it again, it's going to tell you to go there to pick it. And if it's not there, it's not going to know you put it around the corner under the stairs. And be sensible about the use of operators in warehouses. You know, there's a whole story behind that. You can make them do multiple things, but in our country, we typically have red outfits if they're in the inbound side, and blue outfits or something like that, and dispatch, so that you know the wrong people aren't in, or the right people are in the right places. In Europe, you'll find quite often guys work anywhere in a warehouse, inbound, outbound, counting, whatever. And then the last thing is numbers are a big thing in inventory. You know, if somebody receives an incorrect quantity or issues an incorrect quantity, your stock goes out of sync. Barcodes and scanners help you, and so does cycle counting. And I think that is me. I hope I haven't confused you, but this is a really fundamental part of an ERP system, and it's a real area, inventory management, especially in food, because of the shelf life implications and the health implications. I haven't gone through all the things about you can have batch sizes, serial numbers, lots. There's a whole pile of stuff in your ERP system that will help you track what you should pick. Like most people go for first in, first out, FIFO, for accounting purposes. So if you receive things, you take the oldest stuff and you sell it. So that's but in the food business, you quite often get first expiry, first out. So it's like it goes slightly against FIFO, but if it's going to expire, rather use that even if it's younger than another batch. So there are quite a lot of other things we could probably talk about, But I thought that was enough for today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Doug. That was actually very, very interesting. And yes, as you said, it's not for sissies in terms of trying to balance the mix of incoming and the mix of outgoing, and making sure that you've actually got that magic combination. I've got a couple of questions that I just want to ask you, if you don't mind. The first one being in relation to the work that you've done, the work that's been done within SYSPRO in food facilities. Are you seeing increasing projects relating or with the objective of food waste in mind, in terms of optimization?
So I think there's a lot of talk at the moment about food waste. I know we've done some, and there's been conferences on it. There's been international conferences on it because it is such a global issue. But I think a lot of people just don't think about it. The food industry, yes, typically will think more about it, though. So yes, it is becoming more of a topic of conversation. But I think the inventory management implications, I think people are still looking more at the cost of stock and service levels than the fact that they waste food at this stage. I think, yes, people are conscious of it, but it's not, I don't think it's a huge priority, but yes, it is there, and people do try and minimize waste.
So what you're saying is it's not currently a KPI that is being used in the implementation of a ERP system?
Look, it depends on the scale. If it's some of the bigger customers we deal with, yeah, it's quite high on their, what's the word? It's not necessarily on, it's on their agenda, but it's like all board agendas. They've got 20 things they do and they can only do 5. So it's like a number of 7 or 8, So yeah, it's getting more important, but they do understand the implications in the food business of planning your inventory properly to not waste food, because waste is a cost anyway. But I think their priority is that they want customer service first at the least investment in inventory. And that's why they start looking at more sophisticated ways of managing stock.
Sure.
And
the other question is, within an ERP system, you must be able to track what quantity is in fact wasted, or where you are. Well, you should be able to identify losses, and therefore you should be able to identify opportunities where things are being, where there is food waste in, and those could then become areas to optimize.
So you're right. That's actually one of the things I maybe should have said. So, and it's a thing we've been working on at SYSPRO is the listeriosis scare that we had a year or so ago. People started realizing we need to know where we sent our food to, so that if we're going to kill everyone, we can recall it. And so that's the whole story about lots and batches. So yes, we do that, and we also do a thing in SYSPRO where we can do a mock recall. You say that if we had a problem today, could we track where this batch of food was the problem, where we sent it, who are all the customers we sent it to, and what would we have to do to recall it? Because in a situation where food is contaminated either by mistake or by intention, because you've got problems with people trying to, food security problems, where they're trying to poison people, which does happen these days. If you have to do a recall, the faster you recall, the less the damage is both to the market and the number of people that you may impact, but it's also the impact it has on your brand. Now you can see the brand of enterprise, does it exist? I don't know.
I think the other aspect being is that if I'm, sorry, I interrupted you. What you're saying is that
totally answered your question, but
no, yeah, I wanted I wanted to ask, lot traceability is one thing in terms of getting things back, but surely within incoming lot traceability, I should be able to, within an ERP system, identify the expiry date of that product. And so therefore, if I'm not using the product by its expiry date, by definition, then that product would be wasted. So I should be able to use the technology to assist me in identifying these areas, and then use that as an opportunity for optimization or root cause analysis. Why has this happened? Is it either overstocking? Did I buy the deal? Why did we land up throwing this food away, this lot away, and what can we do to prevent it from happening again?
So yes, you're right, and that's kind of the first expiry, first out. So an ERP system like SYSPRO, our requirements planning, or the whole system will look at what the expiry dates are. So you can carry, sell by, or not sell by dates, but use by dates, or expiry dates. That's what you would call them, and therefore it tries to get them through the system faster than It doesn't want you to waste. It wants to give enough shelf life to the retailer at the end of the day that someone can buy it, put it in their fridge for 2 days and still consume it. They also don't want the consumer to waste the product by buying it at the end. You get a special in Pick and Pay. You buy this stuff, if you leave it for 2 days, by the time you get there, it's fraught. So they don't want that. They want to make sure that they're sending stuff out to the market so that the consumer has long enough to consume it and it doesn't get wasted at that stage as well. So one, inventory management of expiry dates in the food manufacturer and distributor is what the ERP system will handle and they look at, but they also take into consideration that you must maximize the shelf life of the products you're sending out into the market. And that is a factor that comes through the planning and the requirements planning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that my only kind of final conclusion is that if I'm going to implement a system like this, and I'm kind of taking my inventory system from paper, back of cigarette boxes to the next level, it's definitely not a 5-minute job. It's definitely going to take quite some time, and the need to fully understand processes and obviously work with a team like yourselves to fully understand how it should be done before we actually introduce a software system to work for us.
Well, in fact, you can do it simultaneously. So that's what typically we do. And I think the thing is, although it's hard, and I'm saying it is quite hard, it's hard sometimes for people to change their attitude towards inventory. We'll just keep, well, we've always done it this way, and it doesn't work anymore. So yes. The other thing it gives you huge benefits. If you can reduce your stock, I mean, that first example I gave you where someone's got 100 million rands worth of stock, if you plan it properly, you can reduce that by 50 million and use that money for something else. Okay, you probably have to write off 50 million stock, but at least in the future, you'll only hold 50 million, plus you increase the service levels. You can probably pay for your ERP system and implementation in a year or two just through that.
Absolutely, and the spin-offs is, from my perspective anyway, would be improve food safety, improve traceability, as well as having an angle on food waste, which we haven't had before.
And significantly reduced operating costs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but in the bag, you get quite major savings. If you manage your inventory properly, you can save enormous amounts of money.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably enough, enough of a carrot for many companies to want to contact you. And so, Doug, thank you so much for taking the time to explain, what we should be doing, how we should be approaching it, some of those pointers that we may have forgotten. And I really appreciate your time and sharing your expertise.
Thanks for your time as well. Thanks for listening.